I thought stepping away from my newborn was the right choice. But in my absence, everything I trusted rotted from the inside out. The worst part? I didn't realize the monster was already inside my home. Welcome to Reddit Toxic Family Telltales channel. New episode every day. 8 months ago, my own casino manager was sitting in the break room with my employees, laughing, spreading rumors that I'd abandoned the business. And when I confronted him, he smirked and said, "Haven't seen that guy in months. He doesn't give a damn about this place." I just stared at him. Couldn't believe the audacity. Fast forward to yesterday. The same man was sitting on the floor surrounded by shredded paper, his head buried in his hands. And I thought, how did we get here? See, I had stepped away from the casino on personal leave. Not because I didn't care, but because I wanted to raise my newborn daughter, 8 months of sleepless nights, midnight bottle feedings, and diaper runs. But I also wanted to test my employees. I didn't want them acting like perfect angels just because the boss was around. So instead of announcing a formal inspection, I decided to come back undercover, while my manager was off enjoying himself in Singapore. And let me tell you, nothing could have prepared me for what I walked into that night. The second I stepped through the front doors, I felt it. Something was off. The security guard at the entrance looked me up and down with pure disgust. I was dressed down on purpose, old t-shirt, beat-up jeans, 3-day stubble, trying not to be recognized. But he muttered to his partner in Spanish, another junky white boy wasting his welfare check, and they both laughed. I understood every word. But I kept my head down and shuffled over to the penny slots. It didn't get better. The cocktail waitress passed me 3 times before she even acknowledged me. When she finally did, her eyes flicked to the wrinkled bills in my hand. She forced a smile and said, "Water's free, but for anything else you pay up front." Then she actually wiped her hands on her apron after taking my cash, like I was dirty. At the blackjack table nearby, a dealer glanced at me, then leaned to his colleague and muttered, "These guys always beat their wives when they lose." The laughter that followed? That burned. Still, I stayed calm. Played the slots. Won $30, nothing huge, but a win's a win. Except when I went to cash out, the cashier looked at my ticket and immediately waved security over. She sneered, "Check if this junkie stole any chips." Before I could even react, a guard slammed his shoulder into me, nearly knocking me against the machine, then started patting me down like I was a criminal. His hands were rough, digging into my pockets while the other employees laughed. One joked that my kids were probably starving at home while I got high at the casino. Then the pit boss strutted over, chest puffed up like he owned the place. He took one look at me and yelled, "This is the type of guy who'd pimp out his own mother for drug money." And the others? They laughed. They piled on. One dealer said I looked like the kind of creep who lurked around playgrounds. Another smirked that men like me were the reason she carried pepper spray. I clenched my fists but forced myself to stay calm. Finally I asked, "Where's the owner of this place?" That's when the pit boss laughed in my face. "Owner? I haven't seen that loser in months. He doesn't give a damn about this place." And my stomach sank. Because I was the owner. And I had left him, in charge while I took care of my daughter. He had promised me the casino would run at the highest standards. Instead, this was what he'd allowed it to become. But I hadn't seen the worst yet. On my way to the bathroom, I noticed staff ushering a group of teenagers through a side door I had never authorized for use. My instincts screamed at me to follow. And what I saw. It still makes my blood boil. Kids. Little kids. Some of them couldn't have been older than 13. Sitting at rigged slot machines in a dark back room. A staff member slapped food out of a crying girl's hands and barked, "Winners eat, losers play." I'll never forget the sight. Pale faces, hollow eyes, dark circles. Some of them so tired they could barely press the buttons. One girl, maybe 9 years old, was quietly sobbing as she played. Then I heard it, a dealer leaning down to tell her she still owed $300 before she could leave. I knew instantly what was going on. Any seasoned casino owner would. They were using these children as collateral for their parents' debts. My chest tightened and the rage that built up inside me was unlike anything I'd ever felt before. I stepped forward and shouted, "What the hell is going on here?" The night manager stormed up to me, grabbed my collar, and hissed in Spanish that I was just another gringo trying to play the hero, probably hoping to touch the kids myself. Then he barked orders to call security, yelling that I'd seen too much. 2 guards appeared in seconds. One slammed his fist into my stomach, knocking the wind out of me, while the other dragged me by the arms. My feet scraped the carpet as they hauled me through the casino, my mouth filling with blood from where I'd bitten my tongue. But even as they dragged me like trash, I wasn't afraid. No, I was furious. Because I knew one thing for certain, when all of this was over I was going to burn this entire rotten system to the ground. And every single one of them was going to pay. Out in the parking lot, blood still dripping from my lip, I fumbled for my phone with shaking hands. I didn't even wipe the screen clean before hammering out a message to my so-called manager in Singapore, demanding a video call right then and there. Through the glass doors I could see the night manager inside, watching me. That same twisted grin stretched across his face as he mocked me, waving his arms around like some cartoon villain, exaggerating every gesture, like this was all just a big joke. But my call? Of course it went unanswered. Why would it? I sat there in my car, spitting blood into a crumpled napkin, chest heaving, until the anger inside me sharpened into something else. Something colder. More dangerous. I drove home in silence, straight into my office and logged into the casino's cloud backup system. My fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling weeks of surveillance footage, searching for the truth I already feared. And what I saw. I wish I could unsee. Children. Being herded through side entrances like contraband. Parents signing papers while sobbing. Tiny bodies hunched over slot machines for hours, some barely able to keep their eyes open. Staff blocking the exits when the kids tried to leave. I sat there shaking, bile rising in my throat, as days and weeks of abuse played out across my monitors. At 3 a.m., my wife found me still staring at the screens. She gasped when one video showed a crying boy pressing buttons, his little hands trembling. Her face went pale. "He looks exactly like my nephew," she whispered. "The timestamp? Just 2 weeks ago." Her nails dug into my arm as we both realized how close this nightmare really was. I needed answers. Fast. I met with my head of security at a dingy 24-hour diner, catching him off duty. He looked wrecked, hollow eyes, slouched shoulders. He checked the corners of the room before speaking. And then the truth came spilling out. He had seen everything. He knew about the kids. But he'd been threatened, his family's lives dangled over his head if he ever said a word. His hands shook as he told me how helpless he felt. By morning, the next bombshell dropped. That business trip to Singapore? Total fabrication. No flights. No hotel records. My manager had been in town the entire time, running this twisted operation right under my nose while I was home with my newborn. At dawn, I drove past his house and nearly crushed the steering wheel when I saw it. There he was, outside with the night manager, laughing, trading thick stacks of bills like they just hit the jackpot. Cash made off children. I needed legal advice. My lawyer's face was grim as he laid it out. If I went to the authorities, the casino would be locked up in a drawn-out investigation. Hundreds of innocent employees, dealers, waitresses, janitors, would be out of work overnight. It was justice versus jobs, and neither option felt survivable. Then my phone buzzed. My wife. Her voice was trembling. She'd started receiving threatening calls about our baby. The caller knew details no one should, like which way the nursery window faced. My stomach dropped. Someone had been watching our house. Back at corporate, the rot went deeper than I thought. Employee records had been doctored, criminal staffers turned into model workers with glowing reviews. My own forged signature was slapped onto fake promotions for the very people running this scheme. One of my assistant managers, someone I actually trusted, broke down in my office. Through sobs, she admitted she'd been documenting incidents, but they'd threatened her elderly mother if she ever spoke up. She slid her evidence across my desk, and I realized the cover-up was massive. They'd been laying this web for months, maybe longer. That afternoon at the country club, while my wife was at her tennis lesson, my manager swaggered in arm with her best friend. He smiled like the devil himself as he dropped veiled threats, talking about how dangerous the world can be for children these days. My wife's friend just laughed it off, clueless. But my wife? She caught the message loud and clear. That night, when she pulled into the driveway, the garage door was wide open. Nothing stolen. But our baby's car seat had been moved. Someone had been in our house. The message was obvious: we can reach you anytime we want. My wife begged me to drop everything, terrified for our daughter's safety. But when I looked back at months of text updates from my manager, it all clicked. Every "don't worry, boss, standards are being maintained" suddenly read like mockery. He'd been laughing at me, grooming me, setting me up from day one. The next morning at the bank, I uncovered the scale of their theft. Massive cash withdrawals, hundreds of thousands of dollars, all stamped with forged authorizations. They'd been draining the casino dry for 6 months straight. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, the pediatrician's office called. Someone pretending to be me had tried to access my daughter's medical records. The receptionist stopped them, but the implication was chilling. They were proving over and over that my family was never safe. My brother-in-law, who sits on city council, pulled me aside and warned me. The manager was spreading stories about me having a breakdown. That I'd abandoned the casino. That I was unstable. He was building a narrative, a shield, so that if I exposed him, no one would believe me. Late one night, I parked outside the casino's secondary entrance and watched him lead a crying woman inside. I recognized her immediately. She volunteered at the food bank with my wife. Another desperate parent being dragged into their trap. I used my master key to slip into his office afterward. In a locked drawer, I found the proof. A ledger meticulously kept. He'd even named it. Juice Kids. Children used as living collateral to pay off their parents' debts. My hands shook as I read it. By the next morning, more fallout. My head chef quit via text, saying he couldn't stomach working in a place run by monsters. The staff had been told I approved all of this, that it was my idea. My name, my reputation, smeared beyond repair. That night, my home security system was hacked. The cameras went offline for 2 hours while we slept. Someone had been in our yard, maybe even inside. My wife clutched our daughter like she'd never let go. And then, at a gas station, one of my cocktail waitresses approached me. Hands trembling, voice cracking, she showed me her phone, photos of bruised children, injuries they'd gotten after being locked in that back room for too long. By then, my closest friend, my brother since high school, called me, his voice heavy with guilt. The manager had offered him $50,000 to convince me to step down again. He knew about my father's breakdown years ago. He was using my family's past against me. The very next day, I saw him leaving my pediatrician's office, casually chatting with the receptionist about security concerns. He was everywhere. Inside every corner of my life. The casino's head of marketing? She resigned after he threatened to expose her past struggles with addiction if she didn't back his lies. And then, just to twist the knife, he started dating my wife's best friend. The noose was tightening, and I realized it wasn't just my business they were dismantling. It was my life. I still get sick to my stomach thinking about how far he went. The way he wormed himself into every corner of our lives. My wife and I came home one night to find the garage door wide open, and the baby's car seat had been moved. Nothing stolen, nothing broken, just that one object shifted. As if to whisper, "We can touch your child anytime we want. How do you even breathe after that?" And then, as if nothing was wrong, he showed up at our weekend barbecue with gifts for every child there. Expensive toys wrapped in bright paper, smiling like Santa Claus himself. The other parents laughed, charmed by his generosity, while his eyes never left me. My wife squeezed my hand under the table so hard it left marks, and we listened as he spun tales about his charitable work with underprivileged kids. I recognized the tactic instantly. The same manipulation pattern he'd used on 3 previous employers, records I'd dug up late at night. First, you win over the inner circle. Then, one by one, you turn them against the target. And now I was the target. That same week, a night janitor flagged me down in the casino parking garage. His hands trembled as he pulled out his phone, showing me secret videos he'd recorded. Footage of children being smuggled in through the loading dock at 3 in the morning. In one clip, a boy no older than 7 called my manager uncle as he was led inside. The janitor had been recording for weeks, too terrified to speak up until that night. Even my neighbor mentioned something odd, how the manager had been asking about our routines. When my wife and daughter were usually home. He claimed he was planning a surprise party for me. My neighbor laughed as he told me, but my blood ran cold. I knew better. I decided it was time for a face-to-face. I set up a reconciliation meeting at a local restaurant, my phone recording in my pocket. Over dinner, he bragged to one of his supervisors about how he had total control of the casino, how he'd turned my own people against me. He was so arrogant he couldn't help but gloat. That arrogance? It was his weakness. But when I sent an anonymous tip to the gaming commission, they brushed it off. Unsubstantiated, they said. He had friends there too, people who owed him or people who feared him. Not everyone was silent though. 3 brave employees, parents themselves, met me in secret at a truck stop outside town. A dealer, a cashier, and a security guard. They told me what they'd seen, showed me evidence. The manager was using company vans, vehicles meant for supplies, to ferry children from poor neighborhoods to the casino at night. And then his ex-girlfriend reached out on social media. She'd fled the state after discovering he was grooming her teenage daughter. Her story was a mirror of the others: charm, control, corruption. She barely escaped. At the grocery store, he cornered me in the cereal aisle. I kept my voice calm, but he unraveled fast, screaming, knocking over a display while other shoppers gawked. Security dragged him out while I stood there silently. For the first time, people saw him lose control, not me. But I couldn't let down my guard. My family reunion was just days away, and somehow he'd gotten himself invited through my wife's best friend. The thought of him near more children, my nieces and nephews, made my skin crawl. The very next day, a mother sobbed in the casino bathroom, telling my wife her daughter hadn't been the same since visiting. She pulled out crumpled drawings, slot machines with crying faces, hands clawing out from the screens. My wife clutched them like evidence from a crime scene, tears streaking down her face. Later, in a private meeting, I confronted him with dates from the ledger I'd found. For the first time I saw it, a twitch in his eye, a crack in his smooth facade. He quickly covered it with a smile, even tried to buy me out. Suggested I take my family on a long vacation. When I refused, I found my car in the parking lot keyed with words so vile I won't repeat them here. His desperation was leaking through the cracks. And I wasn't the only one who noticed. Employees began whispering that he was slipping. Some came forward, describing mistakes he'd made, fits of rage. My tech team found security footage of him meeting parents at 3 a.m., the same parents whose children would later appear in the back rooms. The pattern was undeniable. But here's the thing, I realized his entire empire wasn't as big as he wanted me to believe. Maybe a dozen employees were fully corrupted. The rest were terrified or oblivious. That gave me hope. A mother handed me text messages directly from him, spelling out the arrangement in his own words. He even called it alternative payment plans. My wife cut her best friend out of our lives completely, refusing to let this predator get 1 inch closer to our family. Our marriage hardened into steel. We weren't prey anymore. We were hunters. Still, I refused to stoop to his level. No fabrications, no planted evidence. The truth was damning enough. And during one confrontation at his apartment complex, he slipped. He spat, "You'll never find those files." I smiled because I already had. Parents began talking to a social worker I trusted. She documented their stories, one after another, all echoing the same nightmare. The night manager stopped showing up for shifts after being confronted. Fear was shifting into rebellion. Staff scribbled, "Save the kids," in the dust of old machines. The culture of silence was breaking. I rallied local attorneys, business owners, community leaders. Pro bono lawyers lined up to help. Families found courage. Employees apologized. The head of slots broke down crying in my office, haunted by the children's faces. The cracks in his kingdom widened with every confession. And then came the bombshell. His ex in Arizona revealed he'd run the exact same scheme at his old job. 1 child from that town was still missing. 3 years gone. The thought made my blood run ice cold. We built an underground network, moving families out of danger through motel partnerships, a modern-day railroad to safety. And word spread, employees returned, loyal staff rejoined. They wanted to rebuild what he had destroyed. I even managed to grab his laptop during a staged dinner. My IT team uncovered evidence of similar schemes in 3 other states. He wasn't just a predator, he was a serial predator. The night before my family reunion, my wife and I sat awake debating, do we blow it all wide open in front of everyone, or hold the facade a little longer? Neither of us slept. And then his mask finally shattered. In front of multiple witnesses, he slapped an employee for disloyalty. Cameras caught everything, the rage, the violence, the monster behind the mask. I realized then I might lose the casino. I might lose the family legacy built over 3 generations. But none of that mattered. Protecting the children mattered more. So I leaned into discipline, into control. My Marine training kicked in. I documented every shred of evidence, cataloged every violation. My dealers signed a petition refusing to work with him. No dealers, no casino. His power crumbled. Parents started telling their stories in my office, one by one. They wept, but they were brave. Even employees who had insulted me that first night signed onto my testimony. The tide was turning. He made a desperate play, trying to break into the main safe. But I'd already changed the codes. He was locked out of his own scheme. When his enforcer finally broke and handed me audio recordings, orders to harm kids who resisted, it was the final nail. The evidence was overwhelming. My documentation now stretched 8 months, the exact length of my paternity leave. While I'd been cradling my newborn, he'd been turning my business into a dungeon. I filled 3 binders with proof. Bank records showed $400,000 embezzled through shell accounts. The board of directors, my uncles, my cousins, even my frail grandmother who founded the casino, voted unanimously to back me. They knew saving children outweighed saving face. But the manager struck back. Hard. Child Protective Services rolled up to my house during the reunion, claiming I was unstable, neglectful, obsessed with conspiracies. Neighbors watched as workers walked up my driveway. My grandmother nearly collapsed. My wife held our baby upstairs, refusing to let go. The reunion dissolved into chaos. CPS questioned my family while children played outside, blissfully unaware. Some of my employees wavered. 2 security guards who had supported me before now whispered in corners. The manager had leverage, debts, secrets, leverage to twist people. But I stayed calm. I showed the social worker my evidence, my documentation. My phone recorded every word. And when the sun went down, I made my choice. No more waiting. No more gathering. That night, I drove straight to his apartment complex with everything I had. And I knew this confrontation would be the last. The night I finally went to his apartment, he answered the door in a silk robe, a wine glass dangling from his hand. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. His face went pale. He tried to slam the door, but I jammed my foot in the gap and shoved my way inside. Behind him, I caught sight of the truth, boxes stacked, half-packed suitcases and plane tickets sitting on the coffee table. He was running. That broke something primal loose inside me. Months of watching children suffer, of watching my family threatened, he thought he could just slip away into the night? No. Not this time. I pushed forward as he stumbled back, knocking over a chair. His hand shook as he fumbled with his phone, screaming threats. Promising to ruin my life, destroy my family, make sure I never saw my daughter again. But his words had no teeth anymore. I had evidence. I had witnesses. I had truth. All he had left were lies. He bolted for the back door, but I'd already anticipated it. My security team, loyal employees who had seen the horror with their own eyes, waited outside. Not for pay. Not out of fear. But because they wanted justice for those children. The predator was surrounded by the very people he'd terrorized. Back at the casino, he made one last stand. He locked himself in the main office with 2 of his cronies. Security feeds showed them frantically shredding papers, smashing hard drives, tossing files into a burning trash can. But I wasn't worried. Every file they destroyed was already backed up. We forced the door open with bolt cutters. Smoke filled the room. The manager stood wild-eyed in the wreckage, his once perfect suit in tatters. His allies had already given up, slumped on the floor. Only he still clung to defiance. Then he tried one final gambit. He waved photos, doctored images that supposedly showed me approving the backroom operations. He screamed that I was the mastermind, not him. For a moment, the room went silent. But then, my assistant manager stepped forward. Tears in her eyes, documents in hand. She'd been quietly building her own file for months. Photos, incident reports, date stamps that proved beyond doubt I'd been on paternity leave when the scheme began. His last weapon crumbled in his hands. The mothers who'd come with me, women who had once wept in my office, stood tall now, unflinching. Their eyes burned holes through him. For the first time, he had to face them. Not numbers on a ledger. Not nameless children in a back room. But parents. Flesh and blood. A wall of judgment he couldn't manipulate. I had a choice. Let him slip quietly away and protect the casino's reputation, or drag it all into the light, no matter the cost. My answer was clear. Some evils demanded exposure. Outside, news vans were already arriving, tipped off by the parents themselves. Police lights flashed against the casino walls. The manager's shoulders sagged. His empire of fear was gone. He tried bribing the parents, waving cash, begging for silence. But no amount of money could erase the scars on their children. One by one, they shook their heads, tears streaming, refusing him. When the officers finally cuffed him, his fight evaporated. His head hung low as he was led past the parents he had exploited. Some wept. Others stood stone-faced. But all of them carried the weight of what he had done. And for the first time in months, I breathed. Child services moved in immediately, connecting families with counselors, offering therapy, creating a network of healing where there had once been only despair. The casino itself underwent transformation overnight. A community oversight board was formed, parents holding permanent seats to ensure no child would ever be put at risk again. The back room was cleared. Every rigged machine, every tiny chair, every reminder of exploitation dragged into the parking lot. I lit the fire myself. As the flames roared, parents clutched their children tighter. The smoke carried away months of nightmares. My wife stood at my side, our daughter sleeping peacefully in her arms. She'd never know how close evil had come to her world. Financially, we were ruined. Between embezzlement, legal costs, and rebuilding, the casino bled money. But my family had voted. Children mattered more than profit. We would rebuild or we would close. But never again would money come before humanity. And slowly, people returned. Former employees, dealers, waitresses, guards who had quit in disgust, came back, this time willing to work for less, because they wanted to help make things right. Together, we began to rebuild. The district attorney pressed charges. Testimonies from Arizona victims sealed his fate. He cut a plea deal, his sentence lighter than he deserved, but heavy enough to end his career forever. He'd never hurt children again. 6 months later, we reopened. The casino was unrecognizable. Bright colors, wide open spaces, cameras covering every inch. The backroom was reborn as a free daycare center staffed by licensed professionals. On opening day, my daughter, now 18 months old, giggled as I guided her tiny hands to cut the ribbon. Behind us stood employees, families, community members, and even parents whose children had once been trapped in that nightmare. Their presence was the greatest vindication. The casino no longer ran on dark profits. It ran on something better: trust, redemption, purpose. Late at night, I sometimes walked the floor, remembering what had once been. I kept one photo in my office, the empty backroom cleared and silent. A reminder of how quickly evil takes root when good people look away. My legacy wasn't wealth or reputation anymore. It was choosing humanity over empire. Protecting children, even at the cost of everything else. And as I watched families laugh together where predators once prowled, I finally understood: true strength isn't about control or money. It's about sacrifice. About standing against evil no matter the cost. That was the real inheritance I wanted to pass down to my daughter. Thanks for watching. Today's train wreck is over, but tomorrow's ride is already on track. Subscribe so you don't miss it.